The Anderson Medical Research Center's pristine halls had never felt so sterile as they did that Thursday morning, watching security escort me from the building. 3 years of groundbreaking research, countless sleepless nights, and a potential cure for an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, all dismissed as wasteful and delusional. Dr. Chen, Dr. Victoria Reynolds called from her office doorway, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your funding is gone, your lab is reassigned, and your theories," she smirked. "Well, let's just say the board was very clear about the scientific validity of your work." I clutched my research notebook closer, feeling the weight of years of careful observations and breakthrough moments. They'd let me keep my personal notes, thinking all the important data was already in their system. They were wrong. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and until today, I was a leading cancer researcher at one of America's most prestigious medical institutions. But I committed the cardinal sin of medical research. I questioned the established treatment paradigm. "At least look at the latest patient responses," I pleaded. "The tumor regression patterns." "Enough." Dr. Reynolds' voice sharpened. "Your obsession with this alternative pathway is embarrassing. Real scientists follow established protocols, not wild hunches about cellular behavior." If she only knew what the early trial data really showed. Dr. Tom Zhang, my lead research assistant, caught me at the elevator. "They're already clearing out the lab," he whispered, "but I backed up everything. It's all safe on our private server." I nodded slightly, my hand touching the flash drive hidden in my lab coat pocket. "Any word from the trial patients?" "All 17 are still showing remarkable improvement. Reynolds doesn't know about the last 5 we added to the study." "Good. Those 5 patients would prove everything." The autumn rain felt appropriate as I walked to my car, my mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. The discovery had started with a simple observation, a pattern in how certain cancer cells responded to what should have been ineffective treatments, something that defied conventional oncology wisdom. But it wasn't just an anomaly. There was a clear pattern, a treatment pathway that no one had noticed before. One that, if properly understood, could revolutionize how we treat one of the deadliest forms of cancer. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Emily Wong at Stanford. "Just saw the board's decision. Those idiots. But your last data set. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought." Emily had been quietly running parallel trials, validating my results without Anderson's knowledge. She'd seen the same impossible response patterns in her patients. "The private server?" I texted back. "Secure and updating. Your latest patient data matches our results exactly." I smiled, thinking of Reynolds and the board, so certain they'd shut down a worthless project. They had no idea that the most important research was happening completely off their radar. The thing about cancer research is that it's not just about the science. It's about funding, reputations, and established protocols. Question those, and you become a threat to the entire system. I learned that lesson 2 months ago when I first presented my preliminary findings to the board. "This is nonsense," Reynolds had declared, barely glancing at the data. "You're suggesting that everything we know about pancreatic cancer treatment is wrong." "Not wrong," I corrected. "Just incomplete. These patients are responding to targeted therapy in ways that shouldn't be possible according to current models. Look at the remission rates." But they hadn't wanted to look. Traditional cancer treatments brought in millions in funding. My approach threatened that comfortable paradigm. What they didn't know was that I'd already started a small, unofficial trial. 22 terminal patients who'd exhausted all conventional options. Patients who, according to every accepted medical model, should have died months ago. Patients who were now showing unprecedented recovery rates. My apartment felt empty that evening as I set up my makeshift research station on the dining room table. My laptop connected to our secure server, displaying patient data that would make Reynolds and the board choke on their certainties. The recovery patterns were undeniable. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients showing 70% tumor reduction in just weeks. Blood markers returning to nearly normal levels. Survival rates that defied every statistical model. My phone rang. Dr. James Martinez from Memorial Sloan Kettering. "Sarah," he said when I answered, "I just reviewed your last trial data. This is revolutionary. How quickly can you get to New York?" I'd met James at a conference last year, where he'd shown unusual interest in my unorthodox approach. They seized my official research, I told him. But not everything, I hope. The question was careful, measured. No, the important data is safe. Good. He paused. Because I have something you need to see. Remember those anomalous results I mentioned in my lymphoma trials? My heart started racing. The same cellular response patterns. Exactly. And Sarah, 4 of my terminal patients are showing complete remission. It's not just pancreatic cancer. Your treatment pathway works across multiple cancer types. I sat down hard, my mind spinning. Independent confirmation from one of the world's top cancer centers. We need to meet, I said. But not here. They'll be watching. Already planned. There's a small oncology conference in Boston next week. Reynolds and her crowd won't attend. It's too focused on experimental approaches. But there's someone you need to meet. She's been seeing similar results in Tokyo. I glanced at my screen, where patient data showed the impossible terminal cancer patients recovering through a treatment protocol that, according to Reynolds and the board, was worthless. Send me the details. After hanging up, I dove back into the data. The pattern was becoming clearer with each analysis. Cancer cells weren't just randomly responding to the treatment, they were following a predictable pathway of regression. Understanding that pathway was the key to making the treatment work for even more patients. My phone buzzed again. A message from one of my trial patients. Dr. Chen, my latest scan. The tumors are almost gone. My doctor can't explain it. What you did, you gave me my life back. I thought of Reynolds and the board, so certain in their dismissal. They called my research wasteful, my theories delusional. They tried to bury discoveries that could save millions, all to protect their funding and reputations. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought stopping official trials would end the research. They didn't realize that 22 patients were already proving them wrong. That doctors like James Martinez were seeing the same patterns. That somewhere in Tokyo, more evidence was mounting. Tomorrow, I booked my flight to Boston. In 1 week, everything would change. But first, I had data to analyze. Because while Reynolds and her colleagues were writing me off as a failed researcher, patients were living who should have died. And their survival told a story that would shake the foundations of cancer treatment. The rain pounded against my windows as I worked through the night, each data point adding to a picture that was becoming impossible to dismiss. I thought of my mother, lost to pancreatic cancer 5 years ago because conventional treatments failed her. Sometimes, she told me near the end, the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. She was right, and soon the world would understand why. Part 2. The Healing Truth. The Boston Medical Conference looked modest from the outside, a small hotel conference center far from the gleaming research hospitals where Reynolds and her colleagues preferred to present. But as I walked into the oncology symposium, I knew this was where real science was happening. Dr. Chen, Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo approached, extending her hand. Your cancer response patterns have changed everything we thought we knew about tumor regression. I studied her, brilliant eyes behind rimless glasses, the kind of researcher who cared more about saving lives than building reputations. This was the scientist James had mentioned, who'd been seeing the same remarkable results. Show her, James called from his laptop. Show her what happened with your terminal patients. For the next 3 hours, we compared data sets, my 22 patients, James' lymphoma trials, Yuki's research in Tokyo, 3 independent studies all showing the same impossible results. Terminal cancer patients recovering through a treatment protocol that violated every accepted model. The cellular response isn't random, Yuki explained, pulling up microscope imagery. Look at this sequence. The cancer cells follow predictable regression pathways when exposed to your treatment. Once you understand the pattern, you can trigger the response in almost any patient, I finished, across multiple cancer types. Exactly. James joined us. But it's more than that. The pathway you identified, it's not just a treatment response. It's a fundamental mechanism of cellular behavior that traditional oncology missed. My hands trembled as I pulled up my latest analysis. It's like, we've been trying to stop cancer by fighting it, when we should have been redirecting it. The cells aren't just dying. They're transforming. Back into normal cells, Yuki smiled. Nature's own repair mechanism. The implications were staggering. Current cancer treatments often failed because they tried to kill cancer cells directly, triggering resistance. but we found a way to activate the body's natural cellular repair pathways to essentially reprogram cancer cells back into healthy tissue. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom. Reynolds is presenting at Harvard next week, claiming your research was fundamentally flawed. What do you want me to do? I smiled. Nothing. Let her talk. We have bigger plans. Over the next 3 days, we worked around the clock, combining our data sets and refining the treatment protocol. Other researchers joined us: an immunologist from Berlin, a cellular biologist from Tel Aviv, a genetic specialist from Montreal. Each brought their own pieces of the puzzle. It's not just one type of cancer, Dr. Heinrich from Berlin explained, showing his results. The regression patterns are consistent across multiple forms: pancreatic, lymphoma, lung. They all respond to the pathway activation. The traditional treatments missed it, James added, because they were looking to destroy cells. Nobody thought to look for natural repair mechanisms. On the third day, we presented our combined findings to the conference. The room was packed, not with pharmaceutical representatives or hospital administrators, but with practicing oncologists and research scientists, people who cared more about saving lives than protecting protocols. The data was undeniable. Hundreds of patients across multiple studies, all showing the same patterns. Cancer cells following predictable regression pathways, and most importantly, a treatment protocol that could activate these pathways consistently. My phone rang during a break, a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, this is Dr. Marcus Collins from the National Cancer Institute. We need to talk about your research, immediately. The next week passed in a blur. Meetings with the NCI, emergency reviews of our data, fast-tracked approval for expanded trials. Then came the call that changed everything. Dr. Chen, the FDA commissioner's voice was grave. We've reviewed the combined data from all sites. This is unprecedented. We're preparing an emergency authorization for your protocol. How quickly can you scale up? I thought of my patients, of James's and Yuki's, of all the people who could be saved. We're ready. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Revolutionary cancer treatment shows unprecedented success rates. My phone exploded with messages: colleagues, journalists, former patients, and then the one I've been waiting for, Dr. Reynolds. Sarah, her voice had lost its condescension. The board would like to discuss your return to Anderson. With full funding and... No thank you, I interrupted. I'm actually heading to a meeting at Memorial Sloan Kettering. They're establishing a new research center focused on cellular reprogramming. I'm leading it. The silence was profound. The next months were intense, training oncologists in the new protocol, setting up treatment centers, working with pharmaceutical companies to optimize drug delivery. But the results exceeded our wildest hopes. Terminal patients recovering, stage 4 cancers disappearing, success rates that made the medical establishment's heads spin. 1 year after my humiliating exit from Anderson, I stood on stage at the World Oncology Congress, presenting our results to thousands of doctors and researchers. Reynolds was in the audience. I could see her forced smile as the standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. The paradigm shift in cancer treatment, the WHO director announced, begins today. But the real victory came in smaller moments. The young mother, given months to live, now cancer-free and watching her children grow. The elderly professor who'd resigned himself to death, back to teaching, and full of life. The child who'd faced a terminal diagnosis, now playing in the hospital garden. James runs the East Coast Treatment Center now. Yukai established an Asian research hub in Tokyo. Tom leads our data analysis team, ensuring that every new case adds to our understanding. Last week, I received a letter that made me cry. Dear Dr. Chen, 5 years ago, my wife died of pancreatic cancer because the treatments available couldn't save her. Yesterday, I watched my sister ring the remission bell at your clinic. You didn't just save her life, you gave our family hope we thought was lost forever. Thank you for not giving up when they tried to silence you. Robert Chang. I keep that letter in my office at the new research center. Next to it sits a frame containing my termination notice from Anderson, signed by Reynolds. Together, they remind me that breakthrough moments often look like failure to those too invested in old ways of thinking. The center itself is different from traditional research facilities. We encourage questioning, exploration, new perspectives. Every researcher is taught to look for patterns others miss, to challenge assumptions, to follow the evidence even when it leads to uncomfortable places. Reynolds retired last month. Her replacement at Anderson is implementing our protocol. Though they call it by a different name there, it doesn't matter. What matters is that people are being saved. My mother's picture sits on my desk. Sometimes when I'm reviewing case files late at night, I imagine telling her about all this, about how her death led to discoveries that are saving thousands, about how sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. The cellular pathways we discovered are now standard tests in cancer screening. The treatment protocols we developed are taught in medical schools. What was once dismissed as wasteful research has become the foundation of a new era in cancer treatment. Last month, a young researcher came to me with an unusual pattern she'd noticed in treatment-resistant cases. The senior staff wanted to dismiss it as anomalous data. Look deeper, I told her. Sometimes the most important discoveries hide in the patterns everyone else ignores. She found something significant, a secondary regression pathway we'd missed. Her discovery is already helping us refine the treatment further. The old guard still resists sometimes. Change is hard, especially for those who built careers on previous paradigms. But the results speak for themselves. Every day, patients who would have died under traditional treatments are walking out of hospitals cancer-free. Yesterday, I spoke at a medical school graduation. A student asked what it felt like to be kicked out of my lab that rainy Thursday morning. It felt like failure, I admitted. But sometimes what looks like failure is actually the first step toward breakthrough. The important thing is to keep following the evidence even when everyone tells you you're wrong. The war against cancer isn't over. There are still forms we're struggling to treat, still mysteries to solve. But we changed the rules of engagement. We've learned to work with the body's natural healing processes to transform cancer cells rather than just trying to destroy them. And it all started with a wasteful theory and the courage to follow it wherever it led.